Okay, I see the webinar is now streaming live on YouTube.
Okay, I think we're ready to go.
Hey, great. I'm wondering if we can see the agenda, please.
Yeah.
Great, thank you. Let's see, right now all I'm seeing is the flag.
It's the call to order and pledge of allegiance.
Okay, so I'd like to call the meeting to order for the April meeting of the Aviation Advisory Commission. And if we could have the Pledge of Allegiance, please. Begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America,
To
and
the
the
republic
republic
which stands
one nation,
under
God,
God,
indivisible,
with
liberty
and justice
for all. Amen.
Thank you. Okay. And so if we can have the roll call, please.
Adriana Vondergraaf,
Present.
Bobby Williams,
Here.
Maggie Bird,
Here.
Barry Jacobs has been excused, Robert Trimborn,
Present.
Nanette Metz,
Present.
James Flickinger, Steve Weiss,
here.
Steve Tannehill.
Here.
Okay, you have a quorum.
Thank you. And so for the agenda, we will move to the approval of minutes of the last meeting. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
So move, Maggie.
That's the meeting of February 7th and March 7th. Is that
Both.
correct,
Yes,
Maggie?
both of them. Mhm.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I second, Steve Weiss.
Thank you. All in favor?
Chairperson, can we have discussion, please?
Yes, we can.
Okay, I would like a request, an amendment to the minutes. I'm not quite sure the best way to refer to it, but it's at the top of page 9, right at the end of the section. Make sure I got this right. I'd like to add the following language to that section, please. I'd like to add, in response to a question from Commissioner Tannehill, Director Freitas confirmed the foam is no longer discharged into the soil.
Director Freitas, do you have a comment?
I do not. That is a correct statement. So I do not have any issue with that change.
Okay. Any other comments from the commission regarding minutes of February and March?
Chairperson Vandergraaf, I do have one additional one, and that would be on page, from again, I'm not quite sure how to give you the best reference. It's on page 10, the last paragraph that starts that page. I would like to add the following language. After recognition by the president, I'm sorry, I apologize. I'd like to add the following language. Director Tannehill noted that Oxnard Airport does operate at a loss, and that year-to-date, Oxnard Airport shows a loss of $653,000.
Thank you. Is that your addition?
Yes, it is. Thank you.
Director Freitas, your comment?
That I would have to look at. I'm not sure I agree with that number. So, and we can, that kind of falls in today's report. So I would have to look at that in further detail.
Okay, maybe we can table that until next month, please.
Yeah, and my comment to that is I understand Director Freitas may not agree with that number, and I know we're going to talk about that tonight. I do look forward to that discussion, but I did watch the tape, and that is what I said at the meeting. So that's why I request it would be in the meetings, in the minutes.
We will still go ahead and table that for the next time. We do understand that you did say that and it is on the tape. But Director Freitas will need to do some additional, I think, study on that. And we maybe after his report tonight, we can discuss that in more detail. So we have agreed to add the one comment from Director Tannehill, from Mr. Tannehill, and we will table the other until the end of the meeting. Would anyone like to move approval?
I thought we already did that. This was just.
This is just to add to that.
Right.
So are you to add the one statement from Mr. Tannehill?
Bob Trimboard, I have a comment.
Yes, Mr. Trimboard.
I'm lost. Which minutes are we approving? What date? If we're going to, which ones are we going to defer and which ones are we going to approve?
Mr. Tannehill, would you clarify your statement, please?
I believe these are for the February 7th minutes that we deferred because of, so we could pull the tape and see exactly what was said.
So I'll move approval of the March 7th minutes as amended. Or were they amended?
No, they weren't
I'm
amended.
lost. Then I'll just move approval of the March 7th, 2022 meeting of the Aviation Advisory Commission.
I second that motion. Steve Weiss.
Thank you. All approval for March 7th?
Aye.
Aye.
Any negative? Thank you. And we'll hold the February 7th until the end of the meeting end of this meeting for further discussion. Can we move on to public comment period? Do we have any public comments tonight?
I do see some hands coming up among the attendees. And Anna's going to read a statement, please.
Okay, if you would like to be added to the public comment queue, please be connected via Zoom. If not already connected and wish to make a public comment, you can find the Zoom link on the last page of the meeting agenda, which can be found at bcairport.org/meeting-calendar. If you wish to make a public comment on agenda item number 5, please press the raise hand button now, or if you're calling in today, press star then 9 to be added to the speaker. Thank you.
Okay, can we go ahead with public comments, please?
Yes, first we will hear from Rick Conrad. Rick, if you're able to, go ahead and unmute.
Hi,
And we'll
can you hear me now? Can you hear me?
Yes, 3 minutes, go ahead.
Okay, great. Folks, I just wanted to point out, I've got the agenda. I was looking at the Airport Noise and Capacity Act. This was passed in 1990, and it's preempted local laws which impose a restriction on noise levels generated on either a single event or a cumulative basis, and any restrictions on hours of operation also. As an airport operator, there are contractual obligations to the FAA which prohibit the illegal diversion of airport revenue. That includes direct or indirect payments other than payments reflecting the value of services and facilities provided to the airport. So I just wanted to quickly point out that bottom line, implementing landing fees in order to reduce traffic noise would be a violation of the ANCA. Thank you.
Thank you. Next comment, please.
All right, thank you. We will hear next from David Cronshaw. And David, if you can come on and unmute yourself.
Yes.
Share your camera if you like.
I'm good. I'm good there, Dave. Thank you so much for promoting me.
Thank you, Aviation Advisory Commission, for the time and honor to speak here. My name is David Cronshaw. I'm a local resident of Oxnard and one of the neighborhood council members. I manually track, as part of the group, the Oxnard flight training, airport flight training on a daily basis. I just wanted to go over some numbers. In the last 2 months, our tracking data has seen about a 35 to a 40% increase in the number of training flights originating out of Santa Monica, Van Nuys, and Whiteman airports. Now, this is kind of a new trend in the last 2 months. We no longer are seeing the majority of flight training traffic from our established local Ventura County flight schools. Looks like we're kind of being overrun with LA flight training for some reason. I'd love to know that. We can only assume that maybe it's because of the restrictions that, and maybe the wait times that these LA airports have on flight training, including Santa Monica's weekend ban on touch and goes, and also possibly their landing fees. But we don't know. We don't know for sure because of the data. Many of these training flights that we're monitoring are from newly registered aircraft. Many are older aircraft and registered to actual individuals as opposed to leasing companies or to flight schools. So we thought that was an interesting trend. They're based down of these three main LA airports, and they're now practicing their TNGs over Oxnard. So, I mean, if you open any of the apps, if any of the commissioners open any of the apps, you'll see on a given day, you'll see a steady stream of aircraft flying directly east from Van Nuys and Whitman airports, and northwest from Santa Monica. They're flying directly to Oxnard to practice, and then they fly back. They don't fuel, they don't stop at our airports, which is kind of sad. In today's commission meeting full packets, Director Freitas, you made a case against charging for landing fees. In that case, the comment was made that the TNG operations have not increased in the past 30 years. So the quote was, during the past 30 years, the total number of aircraft operation and TNG operation has only fluctuated slightly, end quote. Our local data completely refutes this comment. There's been a marked increase in training TNG's traffic basically in the last 3 years and mainly in the last COVID year. So it's also disheartening to me that there were, over the last few years of meeting with the Department of Airports, that I was disappointed to also read in the comments that the meeting packet also had an increase in complaints as is the result of, quote, an increase in individuals who are working remotely, which doesn't quite make sense because it negates what's going on. So just hoping that we can all get on the same page with our data, and appreciate your time and your effort of what you've all done. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Next comment, please.
Ben De Benedetto, you have 3 minutes.
All right, great. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. A couple of things on the lease. I read the terms of the new lease, and I also read the synopsis of the Burr Family Trust lease. So to begin with, on the new lease, I think 20 years is way too long of a term for leases. I think that the leases should be renewed every 5 years. And at that point, you'd have an opportunity to charge fair market value if that's changed for those leases. I think that there should be an out clause based on potential closure of the airport for the lease, so that there's no liability to the airport staff, the county, or the city of Oxnard should the airport close for whatever reason. And also, I don't think board members, I think board members should be exempt from owning hangars or leasing hangars, as well as the airport staff. If any of those folks do own a hangar or are partners in a hangar, or they lease a hangar, then I think that they should be removed from the airport staff and they should not be part of any advisory board. And then lastly, similarly with the Burr Family Trust lease, I don't see any issue with that, except that there should be a similar clause that that lease is null and void should the airport close for whatever reason. So those are the issues that I have with the lease. As far as the noise abatement goes, the existing aircraft turning right for exiting On the map, if I'm correct, there is one of the maps, I think the first one shows the possibility of the same basic pattern for an exiting aircraft as for a touch and go aircraft, except they would continue their flight north to exit the area. I don't have any problem with that, actually. I think that's a very good idea. If you have the airport fly directly to the ocean to get their feet wet, basically, and then turn left, you have to have a certain distance that the aircraft must travel before they turn left. Otherwise, they're flying right down over the beach, and it's a violation of the noise abatement that we're trying to avoid. So if they were to fly directly over the ocean and take an oblique turn to the south rather than a 120-degree turn to the south, it would solve that problem. Additionally, the development at 5th and Harbor in their revised 2019 environmental impact report, it states that aircraft will not overfly the development. Therefore, the best answer is to just turn
10
right.
seconds, sir.
I'm sorry?
10 seconds, sir.
Yeah. So the best answer would be just turn right prior to the estuary and not have that problem. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. I believe there are more comments, but I was expecting a agenda item for review of the new lease, and I do not see that on the agenda.
Item number 6E.
Okay, so can we go on with other public comments? Do we have more public comments?
We do, and we have Dave Timms who's set to go. So Dave, when you're ready, go ahead. You have 3 minutes.
Okay, Dave Timms here, and I'm a member of the Hangar Owners Association. Regarding item 6 on the subject for continuing the teleconferencing, I think it's time we got back to a public meeting. I don't see any reason at this point to continue doing teleconferencing. And I don't believe that the county has required public teleconferencing also. Here in Simi Valley, at this very minute, we're having a city council meeting. And if you turn on the television, go to the website, you'll see them conducting a city council meeting in public and without mask or mask option. So just my my inputs that I think it's time we got back to public meetings in person. I don't see any further reason for teleconferencing. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Mr. Timms. Next comment, please.
Next comment would be from Doug Tauber. You have 3 minutes, and just as a reminder, this agenda item is for items not on the agenda elsewhere.
That's right.
Yes, I would like to respond to an earlier comment and as well as the director's response to the proposed changes in Oxnard's landing fee structure. First of all, I disagree with the notion that any revision in the current landing fees that we already have at Oxnard are in any way a noise abatement restriction falling under the provisions of the Airport Noise Containment Act. Secondly, although the director claims the airport operates at an average annual loss of $4,000, the reality now is the airport is currently budgeted to lose over $1.6 million this year alone, including depreciation, which eventually becomes a real cost. Using an average annual loss in this accounting method is an inaccurate way of calculating because it incorporates revenues which may not be present anymore. A classic example of this in Oxnard's case would be the departure of scheduled air carriers in the past who leased office and counter space, bought fuel and paid landing fees, but no longer operate at Oxnard. I will once again remind you that those days are long gone and there are no prospects for them returning in the future. Under Grant Assurance 24, the FAA requires airport sponsors to maintain a fee and rental structure for the facilities and services at the airport, which will make the airport as self-sustaining as possible. Since revenue from scheduled air service has not been coming in and management still insists on maintaining its Part 139 status, no doubt it will be necessary to find other revenue sources to meet this obligation. As you know, a fuel tax is the usual way to collect revenue from outside users of the airport, but a large portion of aircraft flying into Oxnard are training flights from LA County to do touch and goes, and very rarely do they ever buy fuel. Also, recognizing that the airport authority is currently rubber stamping new housing projects around the airport, noise complaints will continue to rise, and the cost of mitigating noise at Oxnard Airport will rise as well. Under Grant Assurance 25, the FAA allows airport revenues to be used to pay for noise mitigation, either on or off the airport. As I stated earlier, we already have landing fees instituted at Oxnard. These fees historically have not been considered a noise restriction by the FAA, and $5.48 per 1,000 pounds has not been considered unfair, unreasonable, or discriminatory, as they have been approved by many other airports, including Santa Monica, which also allowed a revision in fee structure there back in 2013 to be changed to include charging groups who were previously excluded from paying landing fees. I believe we may have a precedence here. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next comment.
Chair, we have Bill Thomas, who I've been trying to promote, but I'm just going to push this other button and see if he can join us by audio. Bill, are you able to hear us? Bill, you can come off mute and begin speaking.
Actually, it was actually for my wife and not me. She was just on my computer.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Did you want 3 minutes?
Hello, this is Pat Thomas. I'm actually on my own computer, and this is just a point of order. As a former member of the Aviation Advisory Commission for about 17 years, my point of order is that I've heard some of y'all mentioning to yourselves that you are directors. I'm sorry, you're commissioners. You're not directors. There is a director of the Department of Airports, but y'all are commissioners. And that was my point of order. I'm just being picky. Good night.
Thank you, Pat. Are there further comments, public comments?
I do see that Dave Timms has his hand in the air, but I believe that we should allow just one bite on the apple. So okay.
I don't know where your sound went.
Okay, I think we've made it through our attendees. I think Pat has already spoken, so I think we're all finished with.
Okay, could we move on?
And Anna has one to read to us.
Okay, thank you. Anna?
Thank you.
One more.
This comment is from Miss Melody Rich. It reads, Dear supervisors, council members, Department of Airports, and airport advisory and authority members, I am writing to express my concerns regarding the appointment of Mr. Stephen Tannehill to the Airport Advisory Commission. I would like to bring your attention that the airplane noise Mr. Tannehill keeps on complaining about may not be as severe as he proclaims. I have friends that live about a dozen houses from Mr. Tannehill's residence. My friends have owned their home since 2005. They have never heard of Mr. Tannehill nor the Channel Islands Neighborhood Council, and they have no problem with any airplane noise. For my own confirmation, over the last 5 months, I have been a regular visitor to my friend's house. I have mixed up days and times. I have never heard any airplane noise while I have been inside their home. Mr. Tannehill seemed to have an endless list of negative complaints regarding planes, flight schools, pilots, noise, safely, pollution, not-for-profit airports, and the latest being trying to instituted takeoff and landing fees at Oxnard and Camarillo airports. Mr. Tannehill has demonstrated that he is a non-contributor to the management and well-being of the county airports. I now believe his only objective is to increase his property's resale value by closing Oxnard Airport. I request that Mr. Tannehill's appointment to the advisory commission be rescinded immediately and that he is not reappointment to any other local government entity. Thank you for your time and consideration. Respectively submitted, Malady, Rich, and that concludes the comments that were received for agenda item number 5.
Thank you.
And Chair, I do see a couple of other names that we can move into, and Mr. La Paz. If you can hear, you can unmute and you'd have 3 minutes.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Michael Lipaz, and I'm a member of the Camarillo Oxnard Hangars Owners Association. And I just heard a rumor in the last 2 days that somebody's proposing landing fees in our airports. And I'd like any of you members of this commission to explain to me what is this proposal and what it's entailed. Thank you so much.
Next comment, please.
Thank you. And Barbara Filkins.
Am I live?
You are.
Go ahead.
I think she was live and then went back off.
Try now.
You are there. We
Okay.
hear you.
I run the how can I say analytics for a global cybersecurity firm. And one thing I want to make on the comment relative to data, it's got to be at a basis where there is no bias. So whether the county collects it, the councils collect it, or somebody else collects it, it needs to be open in terms of the analytics and the analysis so that we have a fair basis for any data-driven decisions. That's number one. Number two, I think it was Mr. E. Panetto that was talking about the 5-year lease plus a few things. If that is not a blatant statement that he wants to see the airport closed, I don't know what it is. And the third thing is to keep in mind is that, and I think Keith can back this up, that the 2 airports are operated as one entity under the enterprise fund for the county. Camarillo operates as a profit. Oxnard operates at a loss, but together I suspect they are both profitable. The harbor administration is also out of the enterprise fund, and I believe that operates as a loss. So I could be reading the budget wrong, but just point of order as far as who is complaining about the airport. Thank you.
Thank you. Next question, the next comment, please.
Chair, I believe that has reached the end. No, no.
Dave, Chair, this is Keith. I do have one item I'd like to add, just to let the commission know. We officially received Scott Aquina's resignation effective March 28th. So I just wanted to pass that on.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, Keith, I didn't catch the name, please.
It was Scott Aquina, who had only been with us for, help me out, Anna, I think a couple weeks.
Thank you.
A very brief time. I'd have to check his appointment date by the Board of Supervisors, but a very brief period.
Okay, can we move on to new business, please? Okay, first of all, we have the adoption of Resolution 9, authorizing remote teleconference meetings for another 30-day period. Mr. Director, have there been any decisions made towards in-person meetings by the County Council?
The only things that I can report at this point is officially county buildings opened up this week, Monday, today officially. And I believe last word I heard is that the April 26th board meeting will be in person for the county board. So it still is my understanding through county council that it is each of these committees discretion to make this decision. But that's kind of the direction of at least where the county board is headed at this point.
Okay, if the April 26th meeting is going to be in person. The next meeting of this committee would be after April 26th. Is there any discussion at the Aviation Advisory Commission on next steps?
Steve Weiss, I think it's time to meet in person and open our eyes up to our new facility to have meetings over at Oxnard Airport that we've been waiting with bated breath.
Other comments from commission members?
Madam Chair, I have one.
Yes.
Does that mean that we're talking about potentially having an in-person meeting on May 2nd? Does that sound right?
That sounds right to me.
Okay, I'd be in favor of that and agree with Steve Weiss.
Okay, other members of the commission?
And when we do go back in person, I understand from a prior conversation, it would have to be 100% in person. There will be no hybrid capability. Is that correct? Maybe that's a question for you, Director Freitas. Can we do hybrid meetings in the future?
Thank you for that segue. First of all, I know that there's been discussion prior to COVID of moving these meetings to the Oxnard Terminal building. I can tell you that that's still up for debate. I think internally we're likely to head back to Camarillo, city of Camarillo. They have the chamber set up and all the technology to implement that. So that's the first thing. And the second thing, to answer Mr. Tannehill's question, we are not set up to do that. Don't have that capability to do that. So it would be, in our opinion at this point, an either or. And the last thing I would just offer to the committee, just as not a recommendation either way, but you may want to adopt this resolution to give you the option either or. Should we take a step, God forbid, in the pandemic or something, doesn't mean you have to do that, but at least you adopt your resolution, you have that opportunity. If you don't have that option. So I'll just throw that out there.
Okay, Mr. Freitas, I have one other question. If this means mandatory meeting in person, or would it be a option to meet in person or remotely if someone was on vacation or something like that?
Yeah, that's a question for county council if you're asking. That kind of goes to Steve Tannehill's question about a hybrid. First of all, we're not going to be set up to do that, even if that was per se allowed by county council.
Okay. Okay, what is the direction of the commission as far as the remote teleconference for 30 days? Yes or no?
Before, Chair, before
Yes.
we get to that, I'd like the director of airports to reach out to the county health officer. We keep hearing quotes from a November letter that was written based on parameters back then. And as far as I know, there hasn't been an update to us as to what the parameters are at present from Dr. Levin. I mean, that's old news.
Yeah. Anna, is there any change from that? I think we asked that question. I don't believe there's an updated from that.
We did post the question to county council in preparation for this meeting, and the November 15th, 2021 guidance from Dr. Levin is still in place. There has been no updates to that letter. So at this time, we're operating based on that letter.
Okay,
I
based
don't
on
I don't
that,
think we should be operating on guidance from November 15th.
Director Freitas, do we operate on guidance from, from the doctor? Is that the guidance we operate from?
Yes, I understand that things have changed the last few months, and I probably would expect that in the next 30 days, we'll see some change, but that is the last guidance, official guidance we have. So that's what we operate at this point. As I mentioned, the county has moved to make some incremental changes here in the last couple of weeks. So all I can offer is that maybe again, this committee, you have to make your decision. You have to keep your choices open if you want to, but that's your call.
Okay, commission members, your choice is to adopt the 30-day period, which means we don't necessarily have to have a remote meeting. If we do not adopt the 30-day period, we are somewhat stuck. What does the commission wish to do?
Chairperson Vandegraff, I'd like to make a motion to approve this, to adopt this resolution. I am sympathetic to Commissioner Weiss in particular has expressed a desire to get back in person. I don't disagree with that at all. But I think Director Freitas's comment is relevant. It's an option, not mandatory. The pandemic, the virus is it changes. There are rising cases in different locations so far, not California. We can't know with 100% certainty we're going to be in 30 days. This gives us the option to meet remotely if we need to. So I'd like to make a motion to approve it.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second. Bob Trimborn.
Chair, we do have one member of the public with the hand raised who may want to speak on this issue.
Thank you. Could we have your comment, please, sir?
Mr. DiBenedetto, if you want to speak on agenda item 6A, go ahead and unmute, and you have 3 minutes.
Mr. DiBenedetto?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I raised my hand by mistake, so please excuse the error.
Thank you.
All right. Nobody else is in line to speak.
Okay. For commission, all those in favor, please say aye.
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 Those opposed?
Nay.
One opposed. The motion carries. Can we go on to the next step? Do the next item, please. Okay, this would be the Kim and Bill Bird Family Trust. Mr. Freitas?
I'll kick that to Madeline in our office. Madeline, you want to give a background on this?
Sure. This may look familiar to some of you. We visited this issue in December, I believe, and it was adopted. The First Amendment for 65C Durley was adopted and by the Board of Supervisors. And before it was signed, we noticed an error in the legal description that was contained in the First Amendment. So this is an attempt to correct that legal description. And while we were implementing that, Mr. Burr had requested a change in the use clause as well. So we are combining that into a revised First Amendment. And the reason that he's asking for a change in the use clause is that the original use clause in his lease included a Part 135 charter service requirement. And since he no longer provides that, he wanted to remove that as part of his requirements, and we agreed. So this is seeking that approval to be included in this First Amendment. You can see the last time we discussed this, Bill Thomas had requested that we have some graphics for people to look at. So this particular map shows where 65C sits in relation to 65A and B. And they share the ramp there. And then 75 was sold some years ago to Saticoy Properties. So all of those hangars share that ramp. Dave, can you put that other slide back up that shows, yeah, so this shows where on the airport this is located to help orient people. Any questions?
Any questions from the commission? No
Stump the
questions?
panel. Stump the panel.
I'll move the staff recommendation for discussion purposes.
Okay.
I'll second.
Any discussion?
I call the question, Madam Chair.
Okay, you call the question. This is a motion to approve the authorization for the Director of Airports to sign the revised First Amendment for the Kim and Bilber Family Trust.
For 65C.
For 65C Durley Avenue.
Madam Chair, I move
Yes.
to approve the stated subject of this proposal.
Okay.
Steve Weiss, I second.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? The motion carries. Can we go on to 6?
Madam Chair, I have
Yes.
a question.
Yes.
Have we stopped doing a roll call vote so that we're on record of how the vote goes down? I mean, can we check with this is new, this meeting, all of a sudden, the way we're doing this.
Well, we used to not do roll call votes, and then we started doing roll call votes.
Well, I think we only did roll call votes subject to the teleconferencing that we've been doing. Obviously, in person, we didn't need to do a roll call vote.
That is my understanding too.
That was not my understanding, but I will abide by the committee. We can do a roll call vote for this if the committee feels necessary.
I don't think there were any nays, so I think we're all right. But I think in the future, just so that no one can come back to us and say, "Oh, you know,
well,
only three people voted."
Of course, Mr. Weiss, we will certainly do that. Can we go on to the next format and content of a draft voluntary noise abatement procedure pilot guide?
Madam,
Mr. Freitas?
yes, Madam Chair, I'll start this off and then kick it to Dave in our office, who's done a lot of great work on this. As you've heard over the many months and last several years, noise continues to be an issue for both airports. And so one of the things we've committed to, and I'll talk about more of those in the next item, but one of the top items we're working on is basically a noise pilot guide for both airports. What you'll see is the first draft specifically for Oxnard, but this is a document that's used by pilots, that we can send to other flight schools in the area that will help them when they come to our airports, how to be the best neighbor they can be. So Dave, if you want to take this over.
Okay, thanks, Keith. Yeah, we've had an episode. Well, not an episode. We had a prior version of this pilot guide that was produced over 10 years ago, and it included a diagram of the traffic pattern around Oxnard Airport, and it was impossibly tight. It was just not flyable, and I think it caused some confusion among pilots who would look at that and say, well, I can't fly that, so I'm not going to try. And residents who look at that and say, well, if they're not on that green line, then they're violating something. And so just to avoid confusion, we elected to retract that guidance. And so this exercise is going to be to put a pilot guide that is informative, has good current information, and has a realistic depiction of the traffic patterns that some, not all, but some aircraft can fly. And we assume that a lot can among the flight training activity. Cessna 172, for instance, we do observe that there's quite a lot of them that are able to fly for the runway 25 normal traffic pattern to the left turns are able to make the turn downwind along Woolley Road, which would be the goal. But we also have introduced an oblique view, and I hope that is crisp enough for you to be able to read this stuff on your screen. But essentially what this does is allow a pilot to really visualize the airspace surrounding the airport, and to be able to note some things that we've pointed out. And we'd also like to allow people to read for the first time that turning right would be among the things that you could request for runway 25. So that's chiefly what our goal was, is to put something up that we could comment on. We can say what we like, what we don't like, what we might want to tweak. And then once we're happy with the format and the content, and we can develop the one for Camarillo Airport as well. But we thought we would start with Oxnard and get your input. So that's really the entire presentation.
So at this point, we're not asking, obviously, in one night to have all your answers, but to digest this and provide feedback as we finalize this. And as Dave mentioned, carry this over to a Camarillo version as well. So just wanted to share that. And if anybody has initial comments, great. Otherwise, you'll probably see this at future meetings as we progress.
Oh, Mr. Director, I have a question. What's the plan for getting this in the hands of pilots or even that aren't based at the airport?
As you've heard me talk about, we're in process of hiring somebody that will help manage the noise abatement program for us, and that would be kind of their role. But what I've seen in the past, we have a lot of data, as you've heard over the years, of what airports are sending aircraft and pilots our way. So, we would envision getting out to those flight schools to get that information out to the airports themselves to share with their pilots, targeting very specifically those that are coming our way between the two airports. So,
okay. And I guess more specifically, would this be basically a card that you could carry in the airplane with you, or is it something on the internet or what?
Yeah, we would do all of those things on our internet, on our website, those pilots that are visiting. But yeah, the intent is to have this kind of as a fold out for pilots, as an insert of their flying material, so that it's easy accessible for them.
Okay.
Yes.
I'm just checking. Yeah, sounds good.
And I have a comment. This is Bob Trimborn. I noticed the crosswind turn shows 744 feet MSL. I think we should round that up to 750. Same with the downwind leg. It should be 1,050, because I don't know about you, but I can't fly an altimeter to within that precise accuracy. And the 3D version shows a turn at 700 feet, which contradicts the indication at 744. So those are my comments.
Perfect.
I have some comments as well, but can I ask, some of the community members told me they were sending in written comments on this agenda item. Director Freitas and team, do we have any public comments that should be read before we go further into it?
Yes, it's absolutely at the chair's discretion. If she'd like to call for public comment now, happy to do that. If she's waiting, I will defer to her.
Okay.
Are there a lot of comments on this program?
For this particular item, we received 4 written comments, but I haven't done the call. We may receive additional comments from those on the meeting. I can make that announcement now if you'd like.
Okay, we can look at the 4, we can do the 4 written comments. I think we also need to have some clarification as to if the written comments come from, well, never mind, let's go ahead with the 4 comments.
Okay, the first comment is from Mr. Arthur Beer. It reads, Aviation Advisory Commission, item 60, Noise Abatement Procedure Pilot Guide. I have reviewed the proposed noise abatement procedure pilot guide. In my opinion, the guide has not been communicated effectively and no enforcement, deterrence, or rules presently exist. Currently, dozens of pilots are ignoring the current fly-friendly touch-and-go pattern. In the first 3 weeks of March, 300 touch-and-go flights were held over the Seabridge, Mandalay areas, which are located miles south of Woolley Road. Note the attached Excel file for specific tail numbers and times. How does the board propose to enforce the new patterns? Please consider 1, provide and publish on your website a phone contact for an immediate reroute supervisor that can be called when violations occur. 2, ensure copies are provided to every hangar and flight school in the greater Southern California area. 3, conduct training sessions for Oxnard touch and go training. Urge everyone who uses this airspace to attend, to include the tower, community members, as well as all board members. 4, relay information concerning the fly-friendly pattern when noticed in the tower and at least hourly via an automated radio signal, so all pilots in Oxnard airspace are reminded of the patterns they are mandated to follow. Signed, Arthur Beers, Seabridge resident. And the attachment noted in the comment was previously shared with all commissioners prior to this meeting. The next comment is from Walter Hagedome. It reads, comments on agenda item C. Commissioners, we are encouraged to see progress on the noise abatement guidelines and especially the addition of a right traffic pattern as a viable option in directing flights. There are several concerns that include the following. 1 guideline requires flights that do not reach 700 feet before the canal proceed over the shoreline and turn left. The diagram shows these planes hugging the coastline and proceeding south without returning to the airport. Is this correct? If so, then planes should be directed away from the homes on the beach. 2, some of the guidelines have been in place but are not followed. How will these guidelines be enforced? Signed, Walter Hagedome, Chair, Oxnard Shores Neighborhood Council. The next comment is from Mr. Alan Glenn on agenda item 60. I want to thank Mr. Freitas for developing the pilot guide as another good educational tool to get the word out about the noise problem that 20,000 residents suffer each and every day. As we have all witnessed during the last 18 months or more, the noise problem is not improving at all. In fact, it is getting worse with more high-performance planes traveling well south of Woolley with total disregard to the fly-friendly protocol. While this tool and others need to continually be shared with pilots, trainers, and associations, the real solution becomes enforcement, as it is obvious that voluntary compliance has failed miserably. It seems that the higher performance planes may not have the ability to fly runway 25 left traffic and stay north of Woolley Road due to the larger radii turns associated with the higher speeds, and thus should be directed to right traffic to achieve the goals of the fly-friendly noise protocol. This is especially important because of the higher decibel noise impact associated with these planes. Lastly, the community would appreciate changing the pilot guide to place more emphasis on the priority as follows. 1, all decisions for patterns are based upon safety first. 2, runway 25 right traffic loops are preferred. Higher performance planes must use right traffic loops. 3, runway 25 left traffic loops are acceptable when airspace congestion reduces right traffic loop viability. 4, no TNGs from 6 p.m. to 8 a.m. daily. Thanks, signed Alan Glenn. And the last comment received for this item is from Ms. Susan Blau. It reads, Commissioners, after viewing your newly proposed guidelines maps for friendly flying procedures over Oxnard Shores, we are encouraged by the proposed right turn option. However, we have the following concerns. With respect to departures, your maps suggest aircraft fly to the water and then turn south along the coastline. With this proposal, the noise from these departures will continue to greatly impact Oxnard Shores residents and the 100 homes situated on the shoreline, especially if they continue south along the shoreline. We are tracking the flights and find that the planes turning right after the canal or continuing to the water's edge subject Oxnard Shores to considerable noise pollution, especially from the older aircraft. Adding to this is the fact that many departing planes begin veering south the moment they leave the runway, and by the time they hit the shoreline, they are often 8 to 12 blocks into and over the Oxnard Shores neighborhood. Our tracking also shows that the vast majority of planes reach 700 feet well before the canal. The solution is for departing planes to fly straight out and then turn right no later than the canal to mitigate this noise impact. Further, we do not see any kind of proposal or plan to enforce these flight maps, and to date, we have seen virtually no enforcement of the current flight path guidelines. Expecting the public to call in and complain is neither a viable nor practical option for enforcement. Thank you. Susan Blau, Oxnard Shores residents. And that concludes the written comments that were received.
Thank you. Is there further?
Thank you, Chairwoman Vandegraff.
May I finish?
Oh, I'm sorry. Did I interrupt somebody? I apologize.
Thank you. I'm asking for comments from the commission.
Okay.
Airport and budget. That was very clear.
Chair, we do have one public member who has their hand raised, Barb Filkins.
Go ahead.
You're going to get sick of hearing from me. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. First of all, I think on the last meeting, either authority or advisory, somebody made the comment that a 172 can't make that crosswind turn to downwind. I can tell you that flying with a primary student, other than being extended to the shoreline by the tower or asked to extend downwind for approaching traffic, a decathlon, a 150, a 172, and possibly a 182 can make that pattern with absolutely no problem and come up over Woolly. Second comment is we do need to worry about twins. They come in higher, they come in wider. So if somebody comes in on downwind, and I was actually taught to probably be a little bit south of Woolly at 1,500 feet, if you're coming in from the Channel Islands, that needs to be considered. I think that as far as staying high over neighborhoods on turning final, that can be dealt with. You know, don't descend below single engine traffic pattern on final. Those things can be dealt with, but twins have to be considered and the higher performance jets. The third thing on right pattern is if you come up on right downwind, you're right into the departure corridor for Camarillo. So that is something that also needs to be considered if you want to make it a permanent right traffic. Our airspace is very complex between Oxnard, Camarillo, and Magoo, especially with instrument, especially with approach control being overloaded. And I think that's another thing that needs to be considered. So safety first. End of comment.
Thank you. Are there further comments?
Yes, I have a comment, Chairwoman Vandegraff. I want to start by thanking Director Freitas and thanking Deputy Director Navy. I think this is a huge step forward, and I'm very pleased to see it. I'm very pleased to see the comment on requesting right traffic. I'm very pleased to see planes coming down from the north being shown how to enter into a right traffic pattern. So I think this is really a great step forward, and I commend both of you for the work you did here. The two things I would guess reinforce that I heard from the public is an enforcement mechanism. As with anything, it's a great looking document, but if people aren't following it, so enforcement becomes critical. And then I think we had a comment from a member of the public about the extending over the water heading south. And we can see the red arrow there has them turn at a more than a 90-degree angle and head along the shore. If that can be adjusted so to push them out over the water so they're not over those homes, over the beaches, I think that would be a good improvement. Thank you.
Further comments?
I have one final comment. This is Bob Trimborn. I think it should say recommended noise abatement procedures in the document.
Thank you. Further comments?
Oh, we do not have any further public comments.
Okay.
Steve Weiss, I have just a brief comment. I mean, we're getting some good input here, et cetera, but this is a work in progress. And I think the community needs to understand that. I mean, we've progressed quite well on this. And I think there's light at the end of the tunnel. So I think this calls for patience from the community.
Thank you, Mr. Weiss. I would strongly agree with you. Other comments from the commission? It's my understanding this was informational only. Is any action expected from the commission at this point, Mr. Freitas?
Chair, there is not at this time. Thank you.
Okay. Can we move on to the next item for landing fees? I believe there's a presentation for landing fees.
There is. So this is a broader discussion in general. And as you heard from many of the public comments, and quite frankly, over the last couple of years, at least the last year, a lot of information out there. And what this started was a request at the Airport Authority meeting back in January by committee member or authority member, Supervisor Carmen Ramirez. And she had heard from her constituents that, possibly a way to limit or reduce the number of touch and goes was to implement landing fees. So she asked for, let's get some information. She'd like to have a discussion, which we will do in 2 weeks at the Airport Authority meeting. But I thought it appropriate that the Aviation Advisory Commission also, we have the same discussion. So I'm going to kind of run through this, but I want to start by, I have heard in the 5 months that I've been here, a lot of things like, things have really changed. These are violations. Why don't they just, we start enforcement. I've heard even tonight, a lot of, enforcement. So I want to kind of go through, we have a lot of, I'll call them folks that we report to, not only the county as an airport department, but Caltrans and FAA, a lot of things we have to abide by. So kind of want to give some history and background on that. So I'll start with, which was already brought up earlier tonight, Anka, Aviation Noise Capacity Act. So what was happening back in the 70s and 80s, 1980s, was a lot of airports across the country were implementing their own noise restrictions, various variations of that. So in 1990, the federal government instituted Anka, which had, they were doing some good things like phasing out noisy jets and had a timeline to phase those out. But one of the things they also instituted was a requirement that any post 1990, any airport like Santa Monica that might have had its noise ordinance before that was grandfathered in, but any new restrictions had to go through a very lengthy and challenging Part 161 study. And to date, so the last 30 years, about 21 airports have tried to do this and get approval. By the way, if you go through the process, you then need FAA approval and acceptance of their 161 study to do whatever restrictions you're proposing. So 21 airports have tried over the last 30 years, and only one has had a slight approval after they went to court, took the FAA to court to finally get it approved, and then was ultimately wiped out because of other restrictions, and it had to do specifically with smaller corporate jets. But anyway, to give you an example, Burbank had tried, spent 8 years, $7 million, and ultimately their 161 study and noise restrictions were not approved. So And that's the difficult thing that I think I'd like to communicate to everybody is that when folks think of this as a noise, pilots are deviating and we should violate or enforcement on them, is remember that what the pilots have been doing that for decades. The left turns, the flight training, touch and goes, things like that. We're trying to change their behavior that they've been doing for decades. So that takes time for us, and I'll get to that at the end of this, what we're going to do to try to get there. But that's kind of the challenge. The mindset is this has been going on for a long time, and now we're trying to change behavior. And quite frankly, all the pilots in the flight schools we've met with so far are open to that, to working with us. But it's going to take some time. It's our website, it's a pilot guide, it's getting somebody in our staff dedicated to doing that full time. So here's the first challenge is Anka. So again, if we want to implement new restrictions, and a landing fee would be that if we're trying, well, obviously we're having this discussion of why it's being implemented. There'll be some discussion about helping us increase revenues, and we'll get to that. But, this really all started with how do we reduce touch and goes. So the other issue is grant assurances. Every time we take an FAA grant, we abide by certain grant assurances, and I think there's 39 of them. But these two in particular, assurance 22 and 24, kind of economic non-discrimination, how that really applies is that if we're implementing, a fee because of touch and goes, that could be construed as us violating this grant assurance. And the other is grant assurance 24, which is, we have a fee and rental structure. As you know, those that have been on the commission for many years, we airports already have a rates and fee structure of how we're going to manage these airports. And these airports are a system. I heard somebody else ask that question earlier today. We are an airport system, 2 airports for the county, and that's how we run our budget as well. So let's move on to the next. So one of the questions is, what are other airports doing? Most of the country and airports our size do not charge landing fees. There are a smattering of them across the country. And the only one we could find as a smaller airport in California was Santa Monica. And all the rest are larger international and larger commercial airports. That is more common for them to charge landing fees. For the most part, they're more concerned about the amount of slots. You can imagine that having smaller, lighter airplanes and those mixed into those airports would be difficult, which is why we are a part of a larger transportation system. The reason that smaller airports like Oxnard and Camarillo get federal funding is because we're looked at as reliever airports. They want the smaller, slower airplanes coming to our airports as opposed to, a 172 being in the mix with 747s at LAX. You can only imagine the difficulty that would be from a transportation system. So that's kind of how it all plays out. But as you can see, majority do not do landing fees for smaller light airplanes. Ventura County does charge landing fees for airplanes heavier than 12,500 pounds. That's something that is in place already at both of our airports. And next slide. So, and Dave, let me close this down. So the question has come up multiple times about a loss. I've seen, operating loss, and I'll just point right to 2021 of $1.6 million at Oxnard Airport. So first of all, that was the projected budget. So the actual fiscal 2021 was 1.2 million. So that's the actual number. And then if you back out depreciation, you kind of see that as you go down, the next number down at $246,000. So I've heard a lot of, well, hey, depreciation is a real number. That is correct. And depreciation is a standard accounting practice, which is what we follow as being a government entity and part of the county. But remember what that depreciation is all the assets that we as airport have under our jurisdiction. So that's the runways, the taxiways, those pavements. It's the buildings that we own, you know, the office we're in, the office is next. So it's all those facilities, including smaller things like vehicles. But, and so in accounting world, you have to account for replacing those in the future. And that's a reasonable, logical way to look at that. But in the airport as a transportation system, that's not a realistic number. And I'll use the example. We get, as you know, federal grants to do improvements, our runways and taxiways. We typically have to only pay about 10% of that large number. And the most recent example is Oxnard Runway. It was a $14 million project. We would typically only have to come up with 1.4 million of that. Because we were in a pandemic and federal dollars were being more generously given to infrastructure like airports, that we didn't have even our share. So the entire project, $14 million, was funded completely. So the same with the buildings that we're in, our office space. You know, those were buildings that came to us when we inherited the airport. So the same with hangars. That's why our leases have reversionary clauses. At the end of those leases, those buildings revert back to us. And we could spend some capital and replace those, but typically we get a few more years out of those buildings, get direct revenue, and then we release the property and somebody else comes in with capital and builds the buildings, and then we start a whole new 40 or 50-year lease, and then those buildings revert back to us.
Get some capital, replace those, but
start all over again.
We get a few more years out of those buildings, get direct revenue, and then we.
There, I'm hearing overlap. So that's why, you know, depreciation in airports is not something that I talk about that really is as important to us, and we got to take that into fact. And if you're down at the bottom between the two airports, you know, the cash surplus and excess dollars in the last 5 years is significant, you know, more than $2 million. And again, we're an airport system. So yes, you can break out Oxnard, and I'm not saying that we aren't. And as a matter of fact, we're looking at 2 vacant parcels at Oxnard right now that we're hoping to put out for solicitation of interest. One's a 5-acre, one's a 7-acre parcel, you know, and those revenues, you know, we would expect could be in the $500,000 range by themselves, those 2 parcels. That's just for a ground rent on those parcels. So maybe next slide. And this is kind of a visual of the same slide. Again, it goes from fiscal year 17 to the right down. So, you know, expended some dollars. Obviously, plus is on the top is Camarillo, and then you have operation, and this includes depreciation. But overall, it's the yellow red line in the middle, surplus in the last 5 years. And then maybe the last slide, Dave. And that talks again, if you take out depreciation, and here's significant numbers, obviously with the 2 combined. And then the last slide, actually, committee member Tannehill sent this one. This is an updated of actual for the current. So you see our cash reserves. So I want to point out, as an enterprise fund for the 2 airports, our budget is about $9 million. And our reserves right now are $11.8 million. There's no entity that I know of, private sector or government, that has more than 100% of their annual budget in reserves. And that's what we're looking at right here. So financially, our airport is in good financial shape. You see it, you know, it's up, it goes down. Most of it ties to, and if you look at 2025, 26, you know, significant downward number, because we're pulling $4 million, what we're projecting, to rebuild the Camarillo Airport runway. And that's a, you know, $40 million project. So we would be pulling, you know, approximately $4 million. So you see it go down, and then the final, you see it step up just a bit. So then I'm moving, now we're out of financial now. Now we're going to something else I've heard a lot about. Let me go back to Sorry, I lost my screen. There it is. Of activity. I've heard a lot of the things have changed significantly. So this is, we go back to 1990, and this is Camarillo, and then we'll go to Oxnard. But you kind of see, you know, early 1990s, you know, we had a total operations of $221,000. You go to the bottom of the screen, and you see it's down to, Dave, I don't know if you can slide all the way down. Yeah, you see at least 2020, you know, 154,000. So the operations have gone down. Dave, maybe the next slide.
Yeah, let's see some graphics.
So, you know, here is a graph for Camarillo that shows what they call, technically in the aviation world, at least air traffic control, is it's called local traffic. Here we call them touch and goes. And then itinerant, somebody who's flying in or flying out, not staying in the pattern. So you'll see, you know, again, Camarillo touch and goes back in the 90s was, you know, way up almost 135,000 operations. And then, you know, touch and goes below that, you know, somewhere around 80. And then you see it kind of go up and down. And then at the very end here, you see them kind of close. But overall, you know, kind of staying, at least in the last 10 years, kind of, it goes up and down for sure. And what we've seen, it kind of follows that traffic, follows the economy, and follows the demand for new pilots. So
Director Fried, this is Steve Weiss. I think erroneously you referred to a monetary number in operations, and I think you just meant it as an operations number of flights.
I'm sorry, what did I say? I'm sure I missed.
I think in the beginning you said something like 200 and some odd $1,000, and you meant
200,000 operations. Yes, you are correct.
Okay,
thank you for the assistance. So then we moved to Camarillo Airport. You know, see similar things back in the 90s.
Oxnard. This is Oxnard.
Sorry,
it's Oxnard.
The title was I see. Mistaken the title, Oxnard Airport. So see a similar thing back in the 90s, still higher in the mid 2000s, kind of going back. And then we end up in the last, you know, 10 years, you know, kind of a fluctuation down and then coming kind of level around 40,000 operations, touch and goes, similar with the itinerant operations.
I stand corrected. This is actually Camarillo. I thought we had Camarillo first.
I'm sorry.
Nope, it's me. Okay.
All right.
Yep.
There we go. And then we have there is the touch and goes, and that's both airports, Camarillo versus Oxnard. As you saw the previous charts, you know, Oxnard, excuse me, has about double the operations in general, and same with touch and goes. A little more than 80,000 touch and go operations, and 40,000 plus for Camarillo. So the other thing,
excuse me, Director Freitas, I think you just reversed what you said, because I was looking at the
go back to it. Yeah, so
line is Camarillo is higher.
Camarillo is higher at 80,000, and Oxnard, you know, has been about 40,000.
Yeah, it's about half of what we got at Oxnard. Oxnard is half of what we got at Camarillo.
That is correct.
Okay, great. Thanks.
So the other thing I wanted to, again, this is helping us understand the challenges we have and the noise complaints. The first couple months, as you all know and recall, Oxnard was shut down September and October. So, you know, we had only one complaint. But what this shows us in Camarillo, you know, we had, I'll call it I think it was 13, 14 individual residences calling. But what you see here is an approach. You know, the majority of our complaints are coming on aircraft that are on the approach to our main runway at Camarillo. And if we kind of go through, you'll see that continues in October. Again, Oxnard, no complaints at that point because the runway was closed. So now here's the first good visual for November. Again, approach end complaints majority for Camarillo, and then you move to Oxnard. You know, as you've heard from our constituents, it's the touch and goes, and that's where you see the left traffic is the bulk. Again, about 13 residences, and the numbers you see, in that one there, 203 complaints, and one resident had called us 107 times. So obviously these issues are very concerning for that one in particular, but all our residents. But that's what this analysis helps us, point out, and as we, and I'll get to that with the things we're going to focus on. This helps us direct our efforts, if you will. So that's what I kind of want to end with is, the proposal came in as, hey, let's charge landing fees to help, reduce the operations, the touch and go specifically. I've kind of laid out some of the challenges we would face in doing that, particularly that if it's under the guise of trying to do noise abatement, we would have to follow some other protocols, go through a Part 161 study, explain why, and all the other hurdles to get through. The financial side, as I mentioned, if we're trying to argue that we need this for not financial reasons, well, first of all, we already have a very good rates and fee structure in place. That's why we have significant reserves. That doesn't mean we don't try to, look at other opportunities to bring in new revenues, obviously, in particular Oxnard, and I've talked about some of the ones we're looking at. But the real issue here is, what are we going to do to be better neighbors? And you've heard me talk about this a few times, but here it is once again, and we're doing that. We are in the process of hiring a new noise abatement program staff person. The title at this point is going to be a public information officer. They will be dedicated to growing and developing this program, which means, meeting with the community members. It means meeting with the pilots, the flight schools, getting new information out to those and educating those pilots and how they can be better neighbors. You've already seen some of the work that Dave and staff have done on our website, our new pilot guides. You've heard us talk, and we're in process and in contract. Obviously, it takes some time to get through that process to get a new system installed, but purchasing a new flight track and data analysis equipment, getting that installed, we're expecting that in the later half of this year. And the last is requesting funding, which we have already, of the FAA to assist us and provide funding, which is about a $500,000 investment in a community FAA Part 150 noise compatibility study. So these are our investment in making us a better neighbor as best we can. And like I said, I'll finish with what I started with, is that it's important that everybody understand these aren't pilots trying to do bad things, we don't believe, and quite frankly, that's not been the feedback. Everyone we've talked to understands and wants to be a good neighbor. It's trying to change their behavior that they've been doing for decades. So it's, not just calling, hey, you're a violator. It's us doing a lot of work to get information to the pilots and the flight schools saying, here's what we need you to do to be a better neighbor. So I'll end with that. And staff, I don't know, Anna, Dave, is there anything particular I missed before I throw it back to the chair?
No, I thought that was a great recap. And we don't have any public members indicating they wish to speak, but I think Anna would like to read out the instructions. And so if chair, if we could have that before we continue, that'd be great.
If you wish to make a public comment on agenda item number 6D, please press the raise hand button now. Or if you're calling in today, press star then 9 to be added to the speaker queue. Thank you.
Great. Okay, we're ready for discussion. Adriana, you're on mute.
Muted, Chairwoman.
Still on mute.
Okay, I can talk again. I do not know how I got muted. Well, maybe some people would like me to be muted, but anyway, commission discussion. Commissioners, I'm sure there is some discussion, please.
I'd like to request if there are any public emails regarding this topic, that we read those out so we have that information as we enter our discussion.
Are there public emails on this topic? Anna?
Yeah.
Are there any public emails on this particular topic?
Chair, I was on mute myself, so shame on me. Go ahead, Anna.
Must be contagious. Okay.
There are 3 public comments.
Okay.
Okay, the first comment is from Walter Hagedorn. It reads, Commissioners, at your meeting last month, I noted that despite 18 months of discussions with the Oxnard Airport management, there had been no improvement in the disruption to Oxnard Shores residents caused by the constant touch and go operations. We have provided a spreadsheet with the violations for March 2022. This is for only 3 weeks out of the month. These are only the flights that are violating the fly-friendly map. The final stats were total number of 17 days with flights were recorded. Total number of flights for 17 days equals 329. Total number of rounds for 17 days equals 1,272. Average hours planes were flying per day equals 6. Particularly bad days, March 2nd, 20 flights, 111 rounds, plane overhead every 3.2 minutes. March 6th, 25 flights, 112 rounds, plane overhead every 3.3 minutes. March 9th, 22 flights, 109 rounds, plane overhead every 3.3 minutes. March 12th, 42 flights, 134 rounds, plane overhead every 2.7 minutes. March 13th, 28 flights, 87 rounds, plane overhead every 4.1 minutes. March 14, 20 flights, 85 rounds, plane overhead every 4.2 minutes. March 18, 29 flights, 116 rounds, plane overhead every 3.1 minutes. Many are old, fly low, and are loud with DB ratings as high as 93. The situation has not improved and may have gotten worse. Walter Hagedorn, Chair, Oxnard Shores Neighborhood Council. The next comment is from Miss Rita Weingarten. It reads, per a May 5th, 2009 article in the LA Times, LA World Airports officials moved to change landing fees at Van Nuys Airport to eliminate its deficit. Quote, there is no excuse for deficits at this airport, unquote, said Airport Commissioner President Rothenberg. Quote, whether hobbyist or corporate jet owner, they should be paying, ... enough to break even, unquote. Airport commissioners raised aviation fuel fees 8 cents a gallon. In the past, Van Nuys budgets have been balanced with revenue, landing fees, terminal rent, and concession earnings from LAX. The airlines tolerated the subsidy on the theory that Van Nuys' low fees attract smaller planes that would otherwise clog busy LAX. Airport officials say they now want to put Van Nuys on a more business-like footing. In addition, Rothenberg said the belt tightening could benefit LAX by increasing the amount of debt the airport can take on. If the Van Nuys deficit can be erased, he said, the airport could save enough revenue to pay off almost 100 million in bonds to finance LAX improvements. It appears we have an identical situation in Ventura, where users of CMA are paying excessive fees to subsidize OXR. LAWA recognized how wrong this practice was, which was done in part to reduce small plane traffic at LAX and increased fees to rectify the situation. Why shouldn't Ventura DOA do exactly the same thing? Thank you. End of comment from Rita Weingarten. And the last comment we received This matter was Alan Glenn. It reads, landing fees are an essential element of a fiscally responsible general aviation airport. The report presented tonight by Mr. Freitas is fundamentally flawed and inaccurately portrays the reason to consider landing fees is solely the means to stop conducting touch and go in paren TNG close paren operations. Here are just a sample of erroneous claims in the report. Number one, quote, OXR operates at an annual loss of $4,000, unquote, yet the budget shows annual operating loss of 1.6 million. Last report shows a year-to-date loss of 653,000. It's simply not good business sense to have one airport subsidizing the other. All airports individually are to be, quote, financially sustainable, unquote. All airport users must be contributing to this financial viability. Landing fees are the most equitable means of a, quote, pay-as-you-go system, unquote, implied by FAA. Number two, quote, charging landing fees would be viewed by FAA as a new noise abatement restriction, unquote. This simply is not true, and there is no evidence to come to such a conclusion. Our white paper illustrates the many regulations that support landing fees for small aircraft. The current landing fee structure was put in place while passenger service was operating. It is time to restructure the land fees to share airport costs amongst all remaining users, just as the FAA regulations direct. This report should be rejected and staff should come back with a more comprehensive look at landing fees from a fiscally responsible perspective. The alternative is to close this airport as it can't be, quote, sustained, unquote. End of comment from Mr. Alan Glenn.
Thank you. Any further comments?
Chair, we do have two members of the public who have raised their hands. But just as a reminder, if you've already spoken on the noise topic, it's through a comment in a prior agenda item, but most specifically the public comments, we would ask that that comment stand rather than have two comments on the same topic.
That'd be fine.
Charlie, looks like you're ready to get a bite here. So go ahead if you're ready.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
We do. Go ahead.
Okay. What we want to be cognizant of that these landings and takeoffs, what they're doing is training skilled labor. What we don't want to do is discourage it or penalize it. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, sir. Any other comments?
We have Barb Filkins. And again, if this is a comment covering the same topic that you've had a chance to speak to before, then keep that in mind.
Okay.
Actually, I'm not talking about noise. I'm just making the point, if you drive traffic away from Oxnard and training because you want to recover revenue, you're not going to get the revenue. So I support what Charlie just said. We have a golden jewel as far as ability for an airport that provides training for an essential part of our economic system. And the question is how to balance that via the communities around the airport.
Thank you. Any other comments?
I believe that is all the comments we have.
Okay. Any comments from the commission?
I'll go first, Chairwoman. Thank you, Director Freitas, for this. And, I understand a lot of what you're saying. And I understand the public comments. And I understand that people wouldn't want to pay landing fees. I certainly get that. And I take your comment about your reserves to heart. Having more than 12 months of revenue in reserves is amazing. And the Department of Airports should be commended for that. But I'm going to disagree with you, Director Freitas, on a couple things. Depreciation is part of generally accepted accounting principles or GAAP. And we can argue, accounting all day long. I spent part of my career arguing accounting. And I suppose others have as well. but we all agree to operate under general accepted accounting principles. That's just the way the world works. So it makes me very uncomfortable to suggest that, yeah, this is part of what we're required to show, and it shows a loss of 1.2 million, but it's really not. I think we should live by our books. And I think the 1.2 you showed, I think is for 2021. I think the 1.6 is for 21-22. So, I would suggest that we should not dismiss depreciation. Frankly, there are other costs that are out there that aren't part of our financials. Pension funds are a big thing in our state, and most entities don't have to account for those. So I think we should live by the accounting principles. With respect, I say that with all respect. I understand you can have a difference of opinion on these matters. That's my opinion. I would say with respect to landing fees, this is all new. This is brought up at the airport authority. That's where I first learned about it. And people have done a white paper. There's a lot of good reading out there. And here's what I see. And I guess I would try to paint a different picture for you. And I know this won't be popular with people who aren't paying landing fees right now. But the picture I would paint is the FAA says you can charge fees to be financially sustainable as possible. It's a very broad definition. It doesn't say, don't look at depreciation. It says financially sustainable as possible. We are in a position, and we can do this. We can subsidize Oxnard with Camarillo, but in effect, what that means is we're charging Camarillo more than they should be charged in order to charge Oxnard less than they should be charged, and that seems wrong to me. The other thing that it just gets my lifetime of training up. If you let people use something of value for free, it creates an economic dislocation that results in bad outcomes. And I think we're seeing some of that. And the other thing we see with the FAA is it clearly states that noise abatement, both on and off airports, is an appropriate cost that can be loaded in as part of the cost of operating the airport. And finally, I'd note we have landing fees, and maybe they made sense in 2008 when we had a lot of commercial traffic, but our business model has changed, and we don't have planes over 12.5 landing here. We basically have small planes landing here. So I think for all those reasons, it makes professional sense to look at operating Oxnard as a standalone, financially self-sustaining entity with fees from whatever source we get them. And landing fees, as we've seen, we do charge them right now. So do other airports, and maybe not so many in California, but presumably that's because they're making money with other revenue options, perhaps through the sale of gas. And they're not charging landing fees, they're charging a tax surcharge on the gas rates. But our airport doesn't have that option. What we see is touch and go landing. So I would encourage Director Freitas to think in those terms of financially self-sustaining airport, including noise abatement efforts that are needed, given where the airport is and the community around it, and charging a fee structure that makes Oxnard financially self-sustaining, inclusive of depreciation. Thank you.
Are there any other comments from other commission members?
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I have one. Yeah, I think the whole economic issue argument about making the airports support themselves by operational fees is vacuous, because Camarillo does not. If in the last couple of years have been anything like the previous years, Oxnard and Camarillo could not exist with just their operational fees. It's really the real estate and the rents are what drives the income. I think Oxnard has some other options. They haven't, and Director Freitas did mention that they're exploring expanding some of those vacant lots into revenue producing elements of the airport. But that being said, I think landing fees in general for general aviation below 12,500 pounds is assumed to be covered by the tax, federal tax on aviation fuel. So that's why there's so few airports that do that, charge landing fees for small airplanes, because it would, if everybody did that, which sounds like the argument I heard, there would be no small airplanes and small airports to service them. Then there would be no entry point to aviation for anybody except through the military. So it's all part of a grand plan by the FAA and some forward-looking people in the past. I know we got a problem over there. It sounds like the slide that's up now says what's being done. I think before you take drastic measures and push kind of questionable arguments that just lead to closing the airport, there should be some time. I hear a lot of arguments about the current problems, but we haven't even put into place this new, if I understand it, the new step in the progress, as Steve Weiss mentioned, is this current suggested or requested flight patterns. We can't mandate flight patterns. The FAA does that. We can request where you should go, but there's no violation for ignoring a request. If there are violations for this, people would be getting slapped by the FAA and probably losing their certificate for some period of time. So these are not violations. They're basically some idea of what's going on currently, but it's not the final pattern. We do have sensitive areas around Camarillo, and they've been, I noticed there's almost no noise complaints from those areas, which are basically the hill north west of the runway, the houses on that hill. There's no complaints up there. So that has been a long-standing flight pattern request that we avoid overflying the hillside houses across the freeway into the northwest. So I think things are being done.
Yeah.
It looks like you got several points here that the Director Freitas is talking about doing. I think we'll see how those work rather than taking the approach to just slam the airport, which is what I see happening right now. That's all I have
Thank you,
to say.
Mr. Williams. I'd like to make a personal comment. In my more than 20 years on the commission, the landside income at Camarillo has carried both airports, at least in my personal knowledge, for about more than the last 20 years or so forth. That has been the way it has been, for quite a period of time. I know Director Freitas is, looking to see what can be done to augment income with the parcels at Oxnard. But again, one thing I find interesting, again, going back to my many years on the commission, was that there used to be a great many noise complaints about Oxnard, but none of them came from the area where the complaints are now coming from. They all came from a different part of the town. Now, I'm not making any comments about why that is or why that isn't. It's just an interesting comment. So again, thank you. Any more comments from the commission about the noise mitigation measures? Okay.
Yes, Steve Weiss.
Thank you, Steve.
I've got a question for Commissioner Tannehill, and it is, I know Steve's relatively new on the commission, and I haven't heard his background as it's related to these neighborhood councils or associations. Do you have any affiliation or associations with any of the neighborhood councils, Steve?
I do not. I live in Channel Islands. I live in the Channel Islands Neighborhood Council community, but I am not a member of their neighborhood council.
Okay, thank you. So my comment here, and I sensed it when we were looking at the master plan, and the talk, reading in between the lines, was that putting a kibosh on Oxnard Airport. And it seems to be coming out more and more, and as to the financial operations of the airport, et cetera. And I find it strange that these same individuals, and I live in Hollywood Beach, so I live in the county, but not of the city of Oxnard, that there's not more concern for the operations of the city of Oxnard. I think the city of Oxnard could learn a lot from seeing the operation of the airports. And I'll leave it at that.
I'll add a comment to that. Just one comment I've repeated from an earlier meeting. I lived in Santa Cruz at the time of the Loma Prieta earthquake, when the highways were closed because of the earthquake, and the city was completely dependent on Watsonville Airport. And I don't know if any of you have ever experienced the fact, or when, the place where you live is completely cut off and, just dependent upon an airport. It's quite awe-inspiring. And again, that happens here when we have fires in the local area. But, Mr. Weiss, I agree with you. I'm starting to hear comments that, close the airport again, close the airport again, close the airport again. And I think individuals don't nearly understand the impact of what Oxnard Airport does for the city and what it can do for the city in case of earthquakes or fires. And it is something that I think you have to experience to understand how that actually works. Thank you. Any other comments from the commission? Thank you. Can we move on to the next item, please? Since this is informational, there's no action at this time. Can we move on?
I just want to let you know that one public member of the public has raised their hand. So,
okay, well, this will be the last member of the public, because we are getting on for 2 hours and we do need to move on in the agenda. So this will be the last public member comment. Go ahead, please.
Yes, hi, thank you. Yeah, I just want to mention Mr. Weiss and Ms. Vandergraff. You have an open invitation to come to my house anytime. I live in Oxnard Shores on Breakers Way. And for anybody that doesn't think that aircraft flying overhead is a problem, you need to be here to experience it. And, there are, 4 other airports in the area, so I'm not particularly concerned about needing to access Oxnard Airport, whether there be a fire or an earthquake. The fact is that we are impacted by this on a daily basis, and I'm not a particularly sensitive person. This is unrelenting. It happens all day, most days. And to just kind of like fluff it off and say, well, statistics don't say it's a problem. It's a problem. And when it's going to be a bigger problem is one of these training airplanes or one of these 40 or 50-year-old airplanes goes down into a residential area, and you folks say, oh, well, we didn't know. We'd never been told. That's when it's going to become a problem for Oxnard. That's all I had to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, can we move on to the next item on the agenda, please? Final form hangar lease agreement. And now we do have a one other item on this for the approval of and that was a Quahota member. Is that still on the agenda, please?
Yes, Chair. I will give a quick overview. I'm just happy to report after 8 years, multiple directors, we finally have a document that all sides can live with. I do want to recognize Steve Bear, John George, Mark Carmack, and in particular, Tom Temple from County Council in the county. A lot of these folks have worked really hard on pulling this together, and that's all I have to say. And we do have chair, or the current president of Quahota, John George, I think has a quick thing he wants to go through, and that's it for me.
Well, since I was around when this all began, I'm delighted. John, you want to go ahead?
Yes, thank you, Commissioner. How's everyone doing tonight? First of all, I'd like to introduce myself. My name is John George. I am the president of Quahota. I'm the Camarillo and Oxnard Hangar Owners and Tenants Association. I was put into this position in January when our then president, Scott Bearer, resigned because he was nominated to the Airport Authority. I'm an Oxnard hangar owner and an aircraft owner, and I've been working, as Director Fries has said, with the county since 2017. So it's nice to be able to meet everyone on the commission. This is really the first time I've been able to speak to the commission as the president. But I'd also like to acknowledge that, as Director Fries said, this has been many people that have been working on this for quite a long time. And I'd like to acknowledge those people a little bit later on in my presentation. So if we could have the first slide, I'd appreciate that. So what I'd like to do is, I don't want to speak for the Department of Airports, of course, I'm not going to do that. And I'm not going to take Director Frias's thunder because I'm sure he's got some good stuff for everyone later. But I would like to give the commission Quahota's perspective on the lease. And the way I decided to do that was just by talking quickly about the benefits to both parties, to hangar owners and tenants, and then benefits to the county. And so what I'd like to start out doing is by mentioning the fact that this is a 20-year term lease. When we were negotiating with the county over the years, our main goal was to try and preserve hangar owners' value in their hangar. And it initially started, as you probably know, with a reversion proposition by the county. But we felt that because we have a lot of retirees, we have ex-military veterans that own hangars, and some of these are part of their retirement plans, we wanted to do everything we could to preserve as much value as we could in their hangars. I would also like to point out that there are a lot of other leases on the airport for hangars that have longer terms than our 20 years. We think that this is a win-win for the Department of Airports and for the hangar owners. It incentivizes hangar maintenance and airport appearance, which we all want. We also think it gives the Department of Airports flexibility on the lease. I'd like to point out there's a couple other paragraphs in the lease, namely paragraph 12 and paragraph 48. Paragraph 12 specifically allows the Department of Airports to move hangars if they need to. And paragraph 48 specifically says that all provisions of the lease are subordinate to any existing or future agreements between the county and the United States of America, i.e. the FAA. So the 20-year lease is a term that preserves the hangar owner's value, but it also gives the Department of Airports flexibility in managing their airport. So we think that's a really good compromise for all parties. The next few things I'd like to talk about are things that we got as owners. If you want to think of it as benefits, we certainly think of them that way, but the county also benefits because they are increasing their oversight of the airport. And the things I'm speaking of are the next three items: subleasing, multiple aircraft, and construction of aircraft. So these things are now allowed under the new lease, but if you read the paragraphs that contain these items, the county has approval authority over all of these items. And so really what that does is it allows the county to better administer and better keep track of the things that are happening at the airport. So we think, again, that's a win-win for both parties. If we could do the next slide, please. Now I'm going to talk about more direct county benefits that they got from the new lease. As I said, there's new procedures for approval and oversight. So this is in regard to aircraft buying and selling. It's in regard to hangar maintenance and additions. It's in regard to subleasing on these other items that we spoke to. So it allows the county to approve and oversight just about anything that happens on the airport, which was never really codified as well as it is now in the new lease. The next item, the county has codified the amount of insurance that we have to have, which is now $1 million policy for hangar owners. And obviously that's a good thing for everyone involved. The county is named as a code insured so that they will be covered if there is some kind of a claim or some kind of accident on the airport. We think that's a win for the county. We were happy to acknowledge that the county wanted that and we did not push on that. The next one is codifies the aeronautical use of the hangar. So in the new lease, there are things that I'm going to talk about that are mediatable and non-mediatable. And what I mean by that is later on in the lease, we reached an agreement on a mediation clause for owners. This is one of the items that the county, the Department of Airports said that they wanted to have as a non-mediatable item. In other words, they did not feel that it was in their best interest to be able to mediate a dispute about the aeronautical use of a particular hangar. We asked for some kind of relief in terms of being able to comply with that. And so Director Freitas was great. We came up with a solution that specifically names the FAA directive on non-aeronautical uses of hangars, and we are now compelled to comply with the FAA directive on that. So, and I might add that it is non-mediatable, so that would be something that the Department of Airports could take action on without having to worry about mediation as an alternate solution. The next item, the county is now receiving a security deposit with the signing of the new lease. They've never had that before as well. So that's just a little bit more security for the county as well. Could I have the next slide, please? The new lease also defines curable and non-curable defaults. So there are defaults that are in fact curable. And by that, we mean that the party that is notified of default can fix a default if they can. And there is a process to do that. There are also defining non-curable defaults as things that can't be fixed, and the county can take action on those in a much more expedited manner. And that was never in the previous leases. The big thing that we got in this lease that we finally reached a solution on was non-binding mediation. And I have this as a county benefit. This is really a benefit for all owners, tenants, and the county. And because I say that because it's a way to solve problems without having to resort to expensive litigation. And that's expensive litigation for an owner or tenant or the county as well. So we think it's a great tool that hopefully will never be used, but we have available to solve disputes in regard to items in the lease. There are certain things that are not mediatable, as I spoke of earlier. Paragraph 4 in the lease, which talks about non-aeronautical uses, is one of them. The non-payment of rent is another one. Using emergency or hazardous actions by people is another one that's not mediatable. So the county has the ability to act on emergency criminal activity or other activities, non-payment of rent, without mediation. But for the majority of items, we have a solution that people can go to without having to resort to expensive litigation on unlawful detainers. What we're really driving at here is we believe that Quahota can be a long-term partner with the county, and we want to be that way. We think that the best airport that serves all people, and I'm talking about not just pilots, but the community as well, is an efficient, well-run airport. And I don't know if anyone's spent much time looking at Camarillo Airport from the Waypoint Cafe or wherever. Camarillo Airport and Oxnard Airport, to a lesser extent, is an extremely well-run and efficient airport. We want the Department of Airports to continue doing that. We think that that kind of airport is something that is really what the county needs and the community needs. So we actually would love to continue to partner with the county to facilitate the compliance with this lease. And to do that, we have a new website. If the commissioners would like to look at it sometime, it's www.quahota.org, COHOTA. Our Vice President, Mark Karnick, has done a great job with that. We have documents for owners to look at as far as compliance with the lease. We have the lease, the proposed lease on the website. We have the FAA non-aeronautical use policy on the airport, on the website. So we're trying to help the owners comply with this new lease. And we think that we have a vehicle that can facilitate that as well. Next slide, please. So really, I'd like to close just by thanking all our Quahota Legal Steering Committee members. Mark Karnick, Gene Barlow, and David Timms have been working on this lease for since 2017. We also have, of course, Scott Bear, who recently resigned to be on the Airport Authority. But I'd also like to thank, obviously, Director Freitas. He's been great since he came in. He's supported us trying to get this thing solved, and he's been great in leading the way on that. County Counsel Tom Temple has worked with our lawyer, Leslie McAdam, who has been great to try and solve these problems. And I really appreciate Counsel Temple doing that with our lawyer, with our attorney, Leslie McAdam. But finally, I'd like to thank the Airport Advisory Commission and the Airport Authority, because they were wise enough to see the proposed lease that was originally proposed several years ago, that it was not a workable document. And they sent the Department of Airports under different directors in the past to go back and rewrite the lease. And that is what enabled us to get to this point where we have a lease that Quahota, the board of directors, has agreed to approve, recommending to all our hangar owners to sign. And we really appreciate the work that everyone's done to get to this point. And we think we have a good document that we can go forward with into the future.
Thank you, John. Since I was around and remembered the first lease and the reaction to the first lease, this is great. Any comments from the commission? Keith, what are the next steps for this?
Anna, Dave, are there any public comments or anything that?
Chair, we do have one. Barbara Filkins has her hand raised. So let's, I will let her speak. 3 minutes if you're ready.
You know, I might have lost the thread. I just wanted to make a comment, probably on another topic, not the lease. But I think we need, from a legal standpoint, look at the come to nuisance clause for some of the complaints. End of quote.
All right, and we also have Dave Timms. Dave, you're ready to go. 3 minutes. You're on mute.
Okay, can you hear me?
We got you now. Go ahead.
Okay, Dave Timms here. I'm also a member of the Camarillo Oxnard Hangar Owners Association. John, you did a terrific job on presenting the details of this lease agreement. And I think everybody with the airport, well, at least the Hangar Owners Association, are very pleased that we got this lease agreement finally through. It went through more than four directors that I know of, Todd McNamee and Kip Turner, and then finally Director Keith Freitas. And I always, whenever I comment and appreciate Keith Freitas, always have to say that I appreciate what Anna Castro has been doing. Whenever we call the airport, we typically talk to her, and she's been very responsive. So I think this is something that we can live with. I believe the county is happy with it, and I think the hangar owners are happy with it. 20-year lease is going to be very comfortable for us, and we have some benefits in it. So that's just my comments. Thank you much.
Thank you, Dave. Any other comments?
Steve Weiss. I've been along for the ride as well.
Yes, you have.
And it's quite an accomplishment. And I commend everyone that was involved in working it through and making compromises. And I think it's a great thing. It's the Hangar Owners Association, the county, everyone worked on it, and we should all be very proud of the accomplishments here. Thank you.
I'd agree with that. Any other comments from the commission?
I'll move the staff recommendation.
I second.
Roll call. I'll say all those in favor. Roll call, please.
Chair Van der Graaf.
Aye.
Vice Chair Williams. Mr. Williams.
Oh, sorry. Aye.
Thank you very much. Maggie Bird. Aye. Robert Trimborn.
Aye.
Nanette Metz.
Aye.
Steve Weiss.
Aye.
Steve Tannehill.
Yes.
That motion passes unanimously.
Okay, can we move on, please?
And I will quickly go through director's report. Cloud9 project at Camarillo, I'm happy to report, has received its approval with the city permits from the city of Camarillo. They did on March 9th. And they also received on March 29th building permits from Ventura County. So that project is moving forward. Regarding AVEX and self-fueling update, right now, because of the change of ownership and then supply chain issues, the question has been asked about the self-serve island. At this point, they're expecting June for that to be back in service. But we did talk to their ownership. They are basically, you call them up and they'll bring their truck over to wherever you are and will give you the same rate as self-serve with a fuel truck delivery, filling up your airplane. And something I mentioned earlier, we have 2 parcels at Oxnard. We're looking to put out for solicitation a 5-acre next to Aspen Helicopter and the tower, and then the 7-acre parcel where hangars 2 and 3 are situated. Taxiway connector at Oxnard also looking, that project just went out on the street. It goes out on the street tomorrow, and bid openings is set for April 26th. And that's to mirror up with the new runway project. FAA didn't have the funding to do the taxiway connectors. That is what we're looking to do. If at this point FAA has about $3 million for us to do all of them, it's about $6 million. So we're hoping that they find additional funding. If they don't, we will phase it once again and only do a few of the connectors and come back for additional funding. And lastly, actually I have 2 items. Lastly, we're not doing a budget workshop. In the past, we've done a budget workshop and then we come to the meetings. After talking with county council and other entities, we realize that really those should be a separate meeting because of who we invite, the membership. Therefore, we're just going to have our normal meetings and do the budget presentation at our normal meetings, both AAC and the authority. And then lastly, just FYI news, the air traffic manager at Oxnard, Mr. Roger Green, officially left us at the end of March, and that company now is looking for a replacement tower manager for us at Oxnard. In the interim, we have one of the known controllers, been there for a long time, Lee is taking over in the interim role at this point. So that's all I have for the director's report.
Thank you. Any comments or questions from the commission?
I just want to thank staff for the detail on the aircraft incidents. It's very much appreciated.
Thank you. Reports?
Receive and file.
Is there a second?
Second.
Does this require a roll call?
No, it does not.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay,
Aye.
thank you. Those opposed? None. Let's move to commission comments.
I have a comment.
Thank you.
Director Freitas, is there a word limit on submitted, I guess, written communications to be read into the record? It seems like some of them are very verbose and took quite a lot of time for Anna to read them into the record. Just curious what the county board of supervisors do when people submit written comment to be placed in the record.
Do you have an answer on that? Or that might be something we have to research?
No, I have an answer on that. As posted in the agenda, there's a 250 word limit. So as part of the meeting prep, I do use a word count on all of the written comments that we've received.
I see. Thank you.
Thank you. It's good to know.
I would just add a comment. I want to thank Anna for all the good work she does as well. That's a lot, Anna, and it's very much appreciated.
Here.
Any other comments from the commission? Okay, time for adjournment. Is there a motion to adjourn?
I so move.
Chair, did we need to revisit the minutes for February 7th?
Yes, we could revisit the minutes. Is it,
At this point, I withdraw the second amendment.
okay, fine. Is there a motion to approve the February minutes?
I so move.
approval.
Second?
All second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Those opposed? Motion carries. Okay, we are at adjournment until Monday, May 2nd. Thank you very much.
Thank
Night,
you,
everybody.
everybody. Good night.
Good night.